This video is going to be a short guide for admins, server admins, on how this mod works, how to set it up, how to debug it if you are tweaking values. Before I begin, this mod is completely free, completely open source. The source code is on my GitHub. You can do what you want with it. You can print it out, roll a joint. You can sell it on eBay. I don't give a shit. Do what you want with this mod. You can repack it. You can make derivatives. Credit would be nice, but you don't need to credit me. I don't really care. With that said, let's get into the guide. It's going to take me a few minutes to walk through the important stuff here. So the most important thing you really need to know as a server admin is this debug message down the bottom and how to interpret it. When you're tweaking the config files, this is where you'll be able to tell what's happening, what the effect of those tweaks is. So I'll read them out in order. FTG is your current fatigue stat. So if I bring up admin tools and click on my character here, you can see I have 861 fatigue out of a possible 5,000. That's what FTG is, my raw fatigue stat. TTF currently stands for time till full. So this is how long it will take in seconds for me to reach full rest based on the current sleeping conditions, the current multiplier, and that is based on the delta number there. The delta number is the difference between ticks. It's my fatigue stats gain delta. So the difference between the last tick and the current tick, how much I've gained or lost on my fatigue stat between ticks. If I'm not sleeping and I'm running around, this will be TTZ, which is time till zero, which is the same concept, but how long it will take based on my current activity to reach 0% fatigue. So state is the state of the moon icon. So 0 means full white, 1 means white with a gap, 2 means yellow, 3 means red, and 4 means red flashing. Night is self-explanatory, means nighttime or daytime. Currently it's not nighttime. Bed means am I sleeping on or near a bed or a tent? Currently I'm sleeping on a sleeping bag, so that's true, which means I'm getting any benefits from that. Inside is false, so I'm not inside a building right now. Temperature, because I have the see how it says temp equals 0 and B equals 10. B is the heat buffer. Temperature is my raw temperature stat. So if I have the heat buffer value above 0, my temperature stays at 0. It's not considered in any of the calculations. And you can see down the bottom right there, my temperature icon has 1 plus symbol. The sleeping bag provides, with the default config settings, a constant 1 plus heat buff minimum. So if I'm sleeping near a fire, that can obviously go higher. But if I'm just sleeping on a sleeping bag in the open, that will maintain a 1 plus heat buff so that I can sleep as long as I can during the day. I can only sleep to 70% rest during the night. I can sleep up to 100% at nighttime. Notice the time till full number is getting a lot closer to 0 now. It started out at like half an hour or something. The player does accelerate their fatigue stat recovery the longer they sleep. So don't freak out when you lay down and it says it's going to take like 2 hours to recover your sleep. That's just because it's just beginning. As you sleep longer and longer, it gets quicker and quicker. And in the config file, this seconds of sleep until full rest approximately comes into play. So with a 1x multiplier, see on the right here it says 1.3x. Because I'm sleeping on a sleeping bag, I get a 30% sleep speed boost. If I didn't have that, and I was sleeping with conditions that allowed me to reach full rest, from 0% rest, it would take me approximately 10 minutes of lying down to recover my full rest. With these multipliers applied, obviously, it's going to be 30% of this number, and it can get up to 2x. If you're sleeping inside, you've got a temperature buff, you've got a bed, it's nighttime, you can recover rest pretty quickly. But during the day, if you're trying to sleep, it's going to take longer and just kind of simulate reality a bit. So anyway, that's the heat buffer stat, maintaining a 10 heat buffer there because I'm sleeping on a sleeping bag. Wet will be either 0 or 1, I believe. If it's 0, I'm completely dry. If it's 1, then I'm wet. And you'll see the little wet icon appear down here. That will limit your rest significantly. Because I don't know about you, but I don't like sleeping when I'm wet, so neither does our character. And it's not hard to get unwet, just take your clothes off or whatever, so we'll wring them out. So it's daytime, so I could only reach 70% full rest right now, 3,500. I'm full white here, but you can see it just dropped down to white with a gap. Under 3,500 is white with a gap. Weight is the percentage of weight you're carrying. Right now I'm 0% weight. And that's indicated by my stamina bar. That's the easiest way to tell. The math formula for calculating the weight multiplier is the same as the stamina bar. So if I spawn in a bunch of nails real quick, you'll see what I mean. So if you see my multiplier is 1x because I'm standing still and I don't have any weight. If I add all that weight on, you can see my stamina bar is way lower now. The multiplier is still 1x because I'm not moving. As soon as I start moving, you can see that multiplier jumped up to 1.8. That's a net minus 1.8% multiplier on my sleep drain. So in other words, my sleep drain is going to drain 1.8 times faster. So if I'm carrying a lot of gear, I'm going to get tired much quicker. If I'm fully geared and weighed down, that's going to make me tired pretty much almost twice as fast as if I'm not carrying anything. And these multipliers obviously add up. So if it's nighttime, that multiplier will be even more penalizing. If we go to nighttime, you can see I now have a 2.3x drain on my fatigue stat because I'm carrying a lot of weight and I'm running around at nighttime. HP is my character's health. So you can turn this off in the config if you don't want it, but with the default config, if the player sleeps for about 2 minutes on a bed, it has to be on a bed or a sleeping bag, a tent, then they will regain health slowly. So it's the only way to regain health, unless you're running other mods that can regain the health stat. So this just gives another reason for players to sleep, another benefit for sleeping. You can adjust how quickly the health stat recovers, and you can adjust the maximum health you can recover while sleeping. So if you want to nerf that a bit, if sleeping to full health is a bit too much for your server, you can disable it entirely in the config, and you do that by coming down to here, max health, bed health, max gain, set this to 0, and that will stop that from happening. This is the max heat buffer stat, so it was 10, as you saw before, it was 10. If you want the full 3+ heat buff for sleeping in a sleeping bag, you'd set it to 30, but I think 10's fine. I think you can even go as low as 1, and that will do the trick to keep the player warm if they're sleeping on a sleeping bag. But you also have this minimum seconds of sleep to trigger health recovery, so 2 minutes before this will start to kick in, and minimum seconds of sleep to trigger the immunity boost. So if you sleep for 2 minutes under any conditions, then you get the same effect as if you took a multivitamin, which lasts 5 minutes. So you get that immunity boost for 5 minutes. T-sleep is time seconds currently asleep. So if you're not asleep, it's obviously going to be 0, but when I'm laying down, that number will count up and tell me how many seconds I've been asleep. So that's a good way to debug, if you're trying to speed up or slow down this config, multipliers or whatever. That's how you can pay attention to what effect your changes are having. And the multiplier is the fatigue drain or gain multiplier, depending on what the player is doing. If they're sleeping, it'll be a positive multiplier. If they're moving around, it'll be negative. One of the final things to mention with the debugging info is the stimulants. So if I take an amphetamine injection, that will boost my fatigue stat to full, and it will pause my fatigue drain for, I think it's 15 minutes. It's not persistent. I didn't want to make it, I wanted to make the mod able to be installed and uninstalled without having to wipe your server. So some of these values are not persistent. So if the character logs out, it's not saved to the character. And when they reconnect, the numbers will reset. But if the character stays online and they inject this injector, you can see my sleep stat just went to full. And now you can see down here it says paused. That's how long my fatigue stat draining is paused. And if you look at the moon icon, there's no notifier symbol now. There's no arrow going up or down. I'm not losing any fatigue stat for the next 15 minutes because I took that amphetamine injector. I can run around as much as I want for 15 minutes before I start to drain again. Or if I log out, log back in, it'll start draining again. And now, if I spawn in an anesthetic, take that, that'll drop my moon icon to 0. So you can see, and it removed the paused effect. So if I throw in an epinephrine, this will also pause my fatigue stat draining. It won't give me any fatigue benefit. In fact, it will drain my fatigue when this effect wears off. When the epinephrine wears off, I lose some fatigue stat because I'm exerting a lot of energy when I take an epinephrine and I'm sprinting for a long time. So it temporarily gives you a fatigue boost for a few minutes, but once it wears off, you lose that fatigue. You lose a little chunk of your sleep stat. But now if I try to sleep while this epinephrine is active, my character just woke up, and you can't see it there, but it says, I can't sleep any longer, I feel too buzzed. So if you're on any kind of drugs that are pausing your fatigue stat drain, as indicated by that number down there, it says paused. So for the next 250 seconds, I won't be able to sleep, and I won't lose any fatigue stat. If I took that epinephrine when my fatigue was a bit higher, like there, for example, you'll see the moon icon will stop draining. It's not draining anymore when I'm moving around. So that's it with the debugging, really. I won't go over all of the config because I'll put this up on my GitHub, the commenting for all of the config. I'll put this on the GitHub, which has the text explanation for each setting. It should be pretty self-explanatory. I named things as obvious as I possibly could. But one thing I want to mention is that with the sleeping bags, this sleeping bag object comes with 2 object models. Let me brighten this up. So when a sleeping bag spawns into the world, either by admin tools or by the loot economy, it'll look like this. It's a packed bag. And this bag, by the way, can go on the Jesus, can't type. Can go on the tool slot of backpacks, so you can carry them around. With the types config, all of this info here, except for lifetime, is applied to the packed bag. So the packed bag will spawn in these locations, in these numbers, nominal, minimum, restock value. But the lifetime value is not the packed bag's lifetime. It's actually the deployed bag's lifetime. So when I deploy this bag, that bag now has this much persistence. So about a week of in-game time, it will stay persistent. If I pack that sleeping bag up, that bag, the packed one, now inherits from this number here, and this shouldn't be there. Get rid of that. That was from testing. The packed bag lifetime is how long the packed bag will last. So about 4 hours in game time. The reason for this is if a player packs up a sleeping bag and just leaves it in the grass or something, it'll stay there for a week if I don't override the lifetime. And you'll have bags in the world which are not sort of findable by players. And so when a bag is packed, also when it's spawning in hunting shacks and stuff like that, if it doesn't get its lifetime overridden when it's in the packed form, then the bag will stay in a spawn location for a week at a time. By doing this, the bag will move around every 4 hours if no one loots it. And so it just keeps the bags moving around the world a bit more. And then once a player deploys them, it's treated like a storage item, kind of, because you can put 4 items in a bag. They have a tiny bit of storage in there. You can fit a pistol or, some ammo or something in there. In this slot here, these 4 slots, 8 slots, sorry. And there's a debug message there that shouldn't be there anymore. Let me remove that while I'm at it. This message here. And so yeah, that's important to sort of understand. This is for the deployed bag lifetime. All of the other config here is for the packed bag spawns. If you want the packed bags to just inherit the deployed bags this lifetime, if you want both lifetimes to be exactly the same, just set this number to 0, and the game will inherit this lifetime for both bags. So if you find this whole thing confusing, just set that to 0, and then these values will be applied to both forms of the bag. So the deployed bag is included in this class name. So when you deploy the bag, it just changes the model of the item. It's still the same item. So exactly the same as vanilla tents. When you find a packed tent in the world, this tent is the same class as that tent that's deployed. And so when this spawns in the world, if I leave that on the ground there, that'll have, several weeks persistence just sitting on the ground. Whereas my sleeping bags work exactly the same, except that you can override the packed bag form. And I've already lost the sleeping bag that I put down. That's why I did what I did with the persistence. So before I wrap up the config section, let me go over some things that might not be super obvious. Fatigue level to negative impact immunity is the moon icon. So by default, remember the moon icon, 4 is red flashing, 3 is red, 2 is yellow. So by default, only yellow and below fatigue will affect the character's immunity level, meaning that if their fatigue stat is yellow or lower, they will have lower immunity proportionate to how bad their sleep stat is, in conjunction with the vanilla stats. So if I go to the formula for calculating immunity, here it is. This is just the vanilla formula, which takes into account health, blood, food, water, and normalizes all of them to get a value between 0 and 1, and that affects your immunity. All I've done is add my sleep stat, and so we're dividing by 5 instead of 4, so that my sleep stat impacts immunity the same way these other things do. But this will only apply if the character's fatigue stat is worse than this number. Remember, 2 is yellow, anything above 2 is going into red. Display sleep messages, you can turn this off. This will stop the character getting text messages when they are sleeping, sort of text updates. I have string tabled various translations for all of the strings in this mod. I used an automatic tool from German Daisy. You can find the tool here. So the translations are automatic. They're probably pretty rough, but they will do the job. If they're not good, you don't like them, just turn them off here. The character will make sounds based on why they can't sleep. For example, if they're too wet and they're trying to sleep, the character will make the wringing clothes sound when they wake up, so it's pretty obvious why they can't sleep. Multipliers, all of these stats are pretty self-explanatory, so I don't need to go over these in any more detail. Same with the drains. The modifiers, this is like, for example, if you take an epinephrine, when that epinephrine wears off, you will lose 1% of your total fatigue stat. Modifiers, activated percent is exactly the same, but it only triggers when a modifier activates or when a player consumes something. So soda cans will regenerate 1% of your fatigue stat. The amphetamine injector will give you 100%. And the modifier pauses is any drug that pauses fatigue drain. So you can see the epinephrine does both. It pauses your fatigue drain for 5 minutes, but when the epinephrine wears off, you lose 1% of your fatigue stat. So epis last about a minute. So after a minute, you lose 1% of your fatigue stat, but you don't have any negative effects from sleep for 5 minutes, and your sleep drain is paused for 5 minutes. This is all self-explanatory. This is the server-side effects config. The important things to mention here is the uncon while driving, uncon while swimming. By default, you can fall asleep while driving if you get too tired. But you can't fall asleep while swimming, since that would be a death sentence. That seems a bit harsh, but if you want to punish players for not sleeping before a swim, turn that on. Everything here is self-explanatory, and there'll be written explanations on the GitHub. Client effects is synced to the client, so these are the visual effects mostly. The audio attenuation is when you're sleeping and you get like that burlap sack sound effect that kicks in after a minute, where the player's asleep now, and it deadens the sound a little bit to just be a little bit more immersive. Allow inventory while sleeping is on by default, so that when the player is lying down, they can open their inventory. They can't, however, put anything into their hands, and they can't drop any items. They can only move stuff around, organize their inventory. I found that a pretty good feature because most people don't find lying down for 10 minutes engaging gameplay, but everyone needs to organize their inventory from time to time and play Daisy Tetris. This is a good opportunity to do that. But if you don't like that for whatever reason, or it's bugged on your server due to other mods or something like that, just set this to 0. Character movement speed is like your damage state. So 1 means your like yellow health. It overrides your your character's movement speed to like the vanilla value. So 0 means no impact at all. 1 means you're slightly staggered, slightly sort of hunched over. 2 means you're starting to like limp, because you're probably red health, I think. 3, I think, is red flashing, where you're really limping. So it's up to you how much you want that to impact the characters. The negative effects of not sleeping for too long are pretty intrusive as it is, so you could always turn this off if that's a little too much for you. But red flashing, it takes a long time to get to red flashing, and it doesn't take much to get off red flashing, so I don't really mind leaving that on in the default settings. Bed objects are beds you can sleep on, so medium tents, large tents, my sleeping bag object, and my static sleeping bag object. So the static sleeping bag is a house no destruct object. It's not persistent, so you need to spawn it using init.c or the Daisy editor, and these are just static sleeping bags you place with editor tools, but the player can actually still sleep on them. So if you have like a safe zone, you can put some of these around maybe. Finally, probably one of the most important things to mention actually is the admins. This is where you put your Steam ID in if you want to turn admin mode on. So once you put your admin Steam ID in and you turn debug mode on, you'll get these messages down the bottom, and you can actually reload this entire config and all the changes you've made in real time by pressing a hotkey. If you are an admin, so before you start your server up, make sure to put your Steam ID in here. Once your Steam ID is in here, when you load into the game, you can come to controls, configure key bindings, Zen, and then sleeping refresh config. Set this key to something, and then now when I hit that key, it will reload the config, resync everything, and so you can debug everything in real time. Only admins can rebind that key, so if you're not an admin, and in fact, let me test something real quick. Let me change that ID, set that to 0, and reload the config. Now if I bring up the keybinds, whoops, yeah, it says admin use only, and I can't actually change that keybind. And even if I could, even if I went into the documents folder and I changed this keybind, it would do nothing if I'm not authorized on the client as an admin from this admin list. Anyway, that's pretty much it. Source code is on my GitHub. Everything's open source. Written guides for the config will be on my GitHub. And yeah, I hope you enjoyed the mod, guys. Stay safe out there, survivors.